Okay, so I want to take a little bit deeper dive on this idea of capital investment because it's an important one that translates into taxable value for property for a lot of these property tax calculations. So as I just entered here, we put in a capital investment of $50 million in the building and $20 million in FF&E. And so I'm going to switch back out to our slides. And this was the setup. We put in 50 million. We've got $20 million of FF&E, so total investment here of $70 million. Now that's going to translate to taxable value in our model. This is a screenshot of a table that's included in one of our reports. We haven't gotten to the reports yet. We'll talk about that in a minute. But ultimately, what you can see here is that over the 10-year period of analysis, we've got the information on the taxable value of the property in the column for buildings and other real property improvements. We can see that there. Starts at $50 million in year one. Then as we go down, we're going year two, year three, and so on. It looks like it's increasing slightly and happens to be increasing by about 2% per year. Now, the next column over, we're looking at the FF&E. We had plugged in, if we remember, $20 million. And now that column, as you go down, seems to be declining in value over time, starting at 20, going to 18 million, 16 million, and so on. So what's going on here, and how does the model take that information about capital investment and how does it translate to taxable value? And as a user, how can you modify that so that you match the assumptions of the case that you want to represent? So there's a couple things going on, and they're all accessible to the user within the settings area. So there's a little gear icon in the model. We'll look at that in a moment. But essentially, you have a number of different inputs that you can control these things. So we had, as we look here, focusing on the building improvements of $50 million, we're kind of passing that through this percentage of building costs added to the tax rolls. So it's $50 million was our input, and taxable value is now 50 million. So essentially, we've got an input there that we're saying 100% of the building costs are added to the tax rolls. That may or may not be a legitimate or an accurate assumption, so we do have the ability to modify that. Now, the other thing that was happening was, as we saw over time, the building value was increasing, and that was increasing by about 2%. So that's our real property appreciation rate. Again, that's another parameter within our settings that we can modify. Now, the FF&E, we had typed in $20 million. That's subject to a depreciation schedule, also available to us in our settings area, and we can modify the depreciation schedule that's being used. So if we look at this here, the first year, the $20 million is taxable at the full amount, 100%. Then in year two, it's only 90%. So we're picking up on the tax rolls at least 90% of the value that was initially invested. And then over time, we can see it's 80%, 70%, on down to about a salvage value of 20% in years 9 and 10 in this case. So if we kind of keep going forward here, and we wanted to make some changes to that, let's say, as I have here, we modify that initial percent of building and improvement costs added to the local tax rolls. We change that from 100%. We can see the default value was 100%. Now let's assume that it's 80%. So 80% of 50 million, that's only 40 million. And so now we can see, if we made that change, we can see that passes through here, and we see the value of property over the first 10 years is only $40 million. Now, the other assumption we had going on for the real property was this real property appreciation percentage. If we modify that, we say, let's forget it. Let's just let it be flat at 0%. So the default was 2%. But let's plug in 2, or let's plug in 0. Now we can see that that column for the buildings and other real property improvements is $40 million all the way down. So no change. Now, the depreciation schedule that we had initially, it was $20 million that they were investing. If we wanted to match a very specific depreciation schedule that the county might use, we can do that. So we can modify those inputs that we had where it was 100, then 90, 80, 70, and so on. If we want to match a particular depreciation schedule, we can do that. So in this case, I plugged in 92%, 86%, 78%, and now that's what we're using to calculate the taxable value of our FF&E in this model. So that's just showing you how you can do that kind of in the math of it. But let me show you again, we have this in our model. We've got our inputs here, and now our settings can be found up here in this gear icon. So if we hit this settings gear icon button, we would be able to see those inputs that we just talked about. So this is our depreciation schedule. This we've still kept at our default values. And over here, we've got our percent of building and improvement costs added to local tax rolls. And then down here, we have commercial industrial real property appreciation. And you're able to edit these defaults and customize and make this analysis specific to your needs in any way. So you just hit edit defaults and you can start editing those values. So that's how the property tax or the taxable value of property comes through. We're going to get back to talking about some other items on the next video.